Hi everyone, welcome to Illustrious Media. My name is Fushio, and it's been a long while since I made my last video. But I want to get back into things by starting to talk about AI, and namely the sheer difference between generative AI and actual human creativity. How fundamentally different in nature human creativity is versus the so-called generative AI era we're living in. So to start out with, I want to just ask a question: why does AI slop look and feel so soulless and empty? Now there's been improvements over quality over the last couple of months and years, but in general, you can see the sheen of generative AI pretty quickly, pretty readily, especially on the stuff that people post on thumbnails. So what is the practical difference between generative AI and actual creativity? And I want to emphasize the term practical difference, because I don't think it's particularly useful to just simply say, oh yeah, generative AI is fake, it feels fake, it's soulless and all that stuff, and it's kind of more of an emotional response. I want to talk about the practical, minute to minute, second to second process that is human creativity versus generative AI. So firstly, AI doesn't create. It formulates averaged, calculated results based on the products of human creativity. The products of human creativity. Understand that. Product comes later, after human creativity. Not during, not at. It is the outcome of human creative processes that has already happened in the minds and soul of human creators. And what you see is a product. And what AI does is scrape the sum averages of these images, paintings, videos, creations, voice, words, and everything that people have already created, and then average it out to a result based on the prompt that you send it in these large language models. On a fundamental basis, if you were to ask an AI chatbot, what does 1 + 1 equal, and it gives you 2, it's not because it actually knows the concept of one object plus another object equals 2 objects. This is actually something animals like crows and ravens and freaking dogs and cats will be able to figure out and understand. Definitely like primates, right? It understands the fundamental reality of one object plus one object equals 2 objects. Now, a generative AI references human written and created textbooks that says 1 + 1 = 2. That's the difference. If you place nothing in a large language model, no access to any human created knowledge or math textbooks or anything like that, it wouldn't know what the fuck to say to you what 1 + 1 = 2. It will give you some fucked up weird ass results, and that's the reality of it. So to really illustrate the difference here of human creativity versus generative AI, I want to actually talk about the practical process of human creativity. And I think I can best do this by describing the process as it applies to me. Now, I'm a writer, artist, designer, creator. I went to film school. I have developed and designed brands and created apparel brands, sportswear, original designs, all which are, in this notebook right here by my own hand. And this is how it usually works for me if I'm creating and writing something, okay? Sometimes I'm a little bit stuck and I take a walk outside and I may have my AirPods on to listen to music while I'm taking a walk. And I'd be listening. Now, I'm a millennial, right? And my primary language is English. I do know how to speak Mandarin. And I'd be listening to a piece of music that maybe is done in, I don't know, a completely different language from a different era. Written, maybe I'm like, listening to anything from like Tupac to Beethoven or Mozart or something. I have a pretty weird band mix in my playlist on YouTube. And, also Chinese music from different eras. And I could simply not even understand the language that the singer's speaking in or singing in. And I've never met the singer. And I don't know the social context of when he or she lived, if they're still alive, or anything like that. But I can be listening to a piece of music that is original, that is an instrument that I don't understand, I don't know, I've never seen, I've never played. And over the course of my walk, as I'm looking visually at the different surroundings, maybe it's a nice park, maybe it's in the neighborhood, maybe I'm out further away around a lake or something. And then through the course of that process, in engaging with this music through the ears, looking visually at the surroundings, Or maybe I'm just walking around downtown and I can just see people doing things and saying things and things happen in front of me. But something would happen, right? And I would get this inspiration from these different things, from entirely different contexts, disciplines, eras, music, people doing stuff on the street, nature, everything. And then somehow that will weave and jog into like this thread of creativity that enable me to make a breakthrough in what I'm doing, which could be everything from creating a design in my notebook for my sportswear brand, Longu, which I'm wearing right here, or writing into my sci-fi universe a character that is a space racing pilot, or a warrior character, in a combat situation. You understand? That's actual human creativity. All that shit is going on in my head, in my mind, in my soul. And I'll take out my phone sometimes and I would just start scribbling stuff, writing quick notes in like OneNote or something, or my notepad in the iPhone. And then I would go home and I would be able to like, oh, I can put this into the outline I'm writing, or the screenplay I'm writing, or I can sketch it into my notebook as soon as I get home. That's human creativity. That's taking original stimuli from different sources, both human created and natural and everything else between. And then because I'm a human being and I create and I think and I'm able to draw inspiration from these sources, I can create an original piece of human created product. All generative AI can do is take the results of what I've created or someone like me created and upload it, and then take a summation, an average, or some whatever, like however the algorithm formula goes. But you see how fundamentally different it is. It's so different in nature. It is as different as me, a living being, or a squirrel, or a chipmunk, or a fish, or bird, versus a rock on the ground that is completely inert, without life, and never will be a living thing, period. That's how different it is. And this is why I'm not terribly concerned about generative AI replacing human creativity, because it's not creativity, period. It's just not the same thing at all. That doesn't mean it can't be extremely harmful per se, because a virus is barely a living creature. It needs actual cells to inject its DNA into to replicate itself. And it'll kill people by the millions. Okay, I'm not saying it's not dangerous. I'm just saying that it's fundamentally different and not the same thing at all. To draw another example I like to use is this. It's like, so that is a gap. That is a fundamental gap between generative AI and human creativity, or actual creativity. It's completely fundamentally different in nature. Just not the same thing, not even in the same realm of concern. To illustrate the gap again with another example, and I have had this discussion with friends of mine who are in tech and who are really all about AI and stuff like that. And I basically challenge them. I'm just like, let's just say, this friend works for Google. I just say, let's take the entirety of Google's worth, trillions, however many trillions, okay? And take 1,000 of the world's foremost scientists, physicists, chemists, biologists, evolutionary biologists, every kind of human talent that you would think you would require for them to replicate molecule for molecule, biomechanical processes of one single bee. It needs to be molecule for molecule, exactly the same, an actual living creature compared to a bee born in the wild. Would you be able to do that? If you had infinite resources and infinite human talent up to today, of the current age of 2026, would you be able to replicate molecule for molecule the entire biological makeup of one single bee? You can't use cloning. You can't use anything. It has to be the periodic table of elements and nothing else. Can you create that? And he sat there going, no, you can't, because that's life, bitch. That's life. What you can create, probably with that kind of resources, is a scale robot of something that acts like a bee, a robot bee. That looks like one, can mechanically act like one, but is not a living creature. It's a robot bee. That is a gap between human creativity and generative AI. You understand? A living creature versus a robot creature of the same size and scale created by people. Not the same thing, and won't ever be the same thing. And I think this is a conversation that needs to happen a lot more. That the technology sector, the people pushing this stuff in such arrogant, entitled ways need to understand that this is fundamentally different than intelligence or life. Actual intelligence, such as human intelligence, like human beings, or even just animal intelligence, like your cat, your dog, your bird, whatever, on a much lower level, but that's still intelligence. That's figuring it out. That's understanding why 1 + 1, one acorn plus one acorn equals 2 acorns, without referencing a fucking textbook. So this is the thing I really want to talk about continuously, because I haven't heard anybody describe the practical difference between generative AI and actual human creativity. And I think once you start to drill down on the practical differences, how fundamentally different they are, no one's going to be confused about what generative AI actually is. It's not creativity. It's just not. It's completely different in nature. Okay? It's the difference between a bee of the natural world versus a bee versus a robot insect that scientists create in a lab, and that has none of the natural processes and functions inside the body of a bee. And I kept emphasizing this: biomechanical processes, as in all the things that a bee, a living creature, does inside its body. Okay, just naturally. Everything from taking in food to processing waste to living as a living creature versus what we humans can create with the most advanced human technology, with infinite funding from the world's biggest tech companies. Not the same, not even close. And that should be an extremely humbling reality, I think, not just for all of us, but for the entire tech sector and the entire AI, generative AI sector in general. Is fundamentally different. So that in my view is a practical difference between generative AI and actual human creativity. And there's another couple topics I want to talk about in later videos, one of which is what is actually acceptable in generative AI? What is actual acceptable generative AI? What kind of generative AI will people be willing to accept in the marketplace? Now, this video may have sounded pretty vitriolic, okay? But I'm also a realist. I know generative AI will be with us going forward. So there's going to be certain things that I think most people on this planet marketplace will accept in terms of generative AI. There's certain things that we'll say, okay, it's like, I know it's generative AI, but I can live with that, because like this is a context and a product in which it's being leveraged that I will accept. And there's going to be other things that people simply won't accept. And that's what I want to talk about in the next video, okay? So check back for that. But thank you for joining me for this first video out of Illustrious for a long time. I hope to be making more videos going forward. Y'all have a great day.